Welcome to our book talk segment on Talk Across America. Dan has written a very interesting book that is going to help a lot of people, I'm sure, with what's going on in the world, particularly when it comes to communicating with each other. He's written a book called Talking Across the Divide, How to Communicate with People You Disagree With and Maybe Even Change the World. We're joined today by Justin Lee, and he joined us by telephone today. Justin, good to talk with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good to have a chance to chat with you. I've seen you work on television. I read about you before. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about the book, which I read over the weekend, and you really hit a note here because, boy, it's getting tougher and tougher to talk to people now, isn't it? About anything, not just politics.
Yeah, it sure is. Certainly politics, but a lot of things, and it's frustrating because there are issues in society that we need to address, and issues sometimes even within our own families that we need to be able to address, and yet we can't because we're just like at each other's throats and becoming more and more polarized. And so somehow we need to be able to talk, but to talk in a way that's not just sort of agree to disagree, but a way that actually moves the conversation forward.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now, and you talk about it in the book, is almost, some people will just not even talk about anything because they don't want to even get involved in an argument, right? So it avoids bringing up things, and that's not a good thing either.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we feel so often like, certainly at least I feel, I know when I get on social media, like, the choice is either argue with people and get nowhere, or just avoid the subject because you're sick of the argument. And neither of those is particularly helpful in the long run. We need to be able to have conversations that actually do move things forward. I mean, there are areas of our lives where we can just agree to disagree, but there are areas where we need to come to some kind of, at the very least, some kind of common ground, some kind of agreement on what the actual facts are of the situation, what our options are, and be able to understand the different positions, even if we don't end up agreeing. And we can't do that if we don't know how to talk to each other. But in this modern sort of polarized era, it feels like that conversation is becoming more and more difficult.
Do you think it started with, like you said, the social media, Twitter and Facebook were the first two big ones, I guess, that people thought or felt they could give their opinion on anything? Is that where this kind of began? It seems to me that's where it kind of began. I guess maybe, some of the cable news as well. You saw those debates every night, and that's gotten progressively more hostile. Where do you think this began, this making it tough to talk to each other?
Yeah, well, certainly this is not the first time, in the history of the country that we've had a divide and polarization. But yeah, studies do show that over the last decade or so, that things have been getting progressively worse. And I think a big part of it is social media. Part of what happens with social media is that we can depersonalize people, kind of dehumanize people, and just put them into categories and, say things that we wouldn't say face to face. But one of the other things that happens is that Facebook, for instance, creates a kind of echo chamber effect for us. So if you tend to lean to the right, for instance, and you have some friends who are more liberal and some folks are more conservative, but maybe you're more conservative, and so you click more on the right-leaning articles that your conservative friends post, Facebook's going to show you more and more of that because they have an algorithm that's designed to show you what you want to see. And if you lean left and you don't click those articles, you're going to see less and less of it. And so eventually we start seeing on social media only the stuff that we agree with, the stuff that reinforces our existing opinions, and so we become further and further apart, and we understand the other side less and less. And if we don't understand them, how can we ever find any kind of common ground? So I think that's why it's vital that we learn how to talk to each other again, even where we don't disagree. Or excuse me, even where we don't agree.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned, this isn't the first time. Obviously, you go back in history, the 60s were a difficult time. Obviously, there's a great divide at that point, but there wasn't any of the other social media and all that. But and there was arguments, don't get me wrong, but I think people seemed to, at least both sides, talk to each other better then. what was going on with the war and all that than now. So it was different.
Well, and there's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War where he says, husband and wife may be divorced and go out of the presence and beyond the reach of each other, but the different parts of our country cannot do this. Yeah. And, we had a period in history where, the different parts of our country did try to do that. And, I think that if we're going to, as a society, continue to thrive, we can't just be two different countries. We have to find a way to talk to each other. And there are ways to do it. But in my book, Talking Across the Divide, I talk about 5 barriers that keep us from being heard by the people who disagree with us. And I try to offer some strategies for overcoming those barriers so that we actually can have productive conversations again.
I know one of the chapters I thought was very effective was shut up and listen. A lot of people don't listen anymore. But that art is not quite there anymore. At least it's not being taught.
It's such a simple idea that listening to somebody makes them, in return, more likely to listen to you. And also you learn a lot about what's really motivating them, about maybe falsehoods that they've believed, misconceptions they have about your side, and so forth. But it's hard to do. You can understand intellectually that listening is important, but knowing how to do it is difficult, especially if you feel like their side has already been heard too much. But it really is an incredibly powerful tool.
And again, it's not just politics. You talk about other things in the book, just religion and other things. Give a tip or two, if you would. Some families obviously have not even had dinners together over some issues, right? Between maybe parents and children, or that kind of thing, right? So give a tip or two what people can do there to kind of bring the family back together.
Yeah. Well, again, I think listening is really important. I think another thing that you can do is resist the urge to demonize or villainize the other person, to recognize that even if somebody has done something that was very hurtful, even if they've done some really bad things, you can believe that what this person has done is bad, and still recognize that in some way they still see themselves as the protagonist of the story. They still see things in a way that allows them to feel like they're the good guy. And if you can come to understand why they see it that way, then you can help tell a different story that helps them to understand where you're coming from and to change things without feeling like they're just a villain. Because if you go in painting somebody as a villain and say, well, you're just a terrible person, you need to stop being a terrible person, they're going to shut you down right away because they don't see themselves as a terrible person. Again, it's difficult to do, but if you can learn to do these things to try to understand where the other person's coming from, you can get the conversation to a place that they're then able to start understanding where you're coming from.
Well, Talking Across the Divide, how to communicate with people you disagree with and maybe even change the world, the full title of the book. And we've been talking with Justin Lee today. I know we just have limited time, but Justin, give out your website if you would. People get more information about the book.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big geek from way back, so my website is geekyjustin.com.
I saw that there. I figured I wasn't sure if that was your only website, but yeah, it's a great title.
I decided to embrace it. So, geekyjustin.com, and there's information on that book and my first book, Torn, which is about the LGBT Christian debate. And I'm interested in continuing this dialogue with folks as they read the book and continuing to talk about what this looks like on different issues. So, geekyjustin.com, they can connect with me, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Great. Yeah, sometime down the road, hopefully we get a chance to talk again about what you just mentioned, the LGBT debate and all that. That's interesting. I know we didn't have time today, but you're doing great work with that. But Justin Lee, great talking with you. Hopefully we'll talk again.
Thanks so much.